Hey everybody! In this update video, this is really not an episode; it's an update. I'm going to give you an update on my two projects. So the first one is our Zenith 8S563X that we're doing for Lisa G. So you'll see here that we've got most of the caps replaced. We still have a few back here we need to do, but for the most part, we're doing really well. But I've reached a turning point here that I need to take a step back and rethink for a second. So if you recall, in the last episode, I mentioned that the other side of the capacitors, the filter capacitors, don't typically go to the chassis in this radio, which is unusual. Most of the radios I worked on, the negative side of the filter caps go to the chassis. Well, in this radio, on the schematic, it doesn't show that. It actually shows them going to the center tap of the high voltage side of the transformer. Well, when I look at this radio, I've started to disconnect all the components from the original filter cap, and I noticed that the high voltage wire that comes out the center tap, which is this striped wire, you probably can't see it, it actually goes to one of the grounding lugs on the old filter cap. And if I take my meter and go from here to the chassis, I get connectivity. And first I thought, well, maybe that's wrong, maybe there's a wafer in there that's broken, but it's not wrong. This radio does have all of those connections going to the chassis, but the schematic doesn't really show that. Matter of fact, if you follow the schematic right here, so here is our center tap, and you'll see here it goes to one of the caps. It goes to another one of the caps, and it shoots out over here and goes up to the 6A8G converter tube. But it also shoots up here, connects to another capacitor, and then it goes up to the cathode of the 6AC5G power ramp tube. But it also shoots a line across here to resistor R16. And R16 is a 52 ohm wire wound resistor, and look where it goes, to ground. So theoretically, there is a reference to ground on these capacitors, on these filter caps. That's not typically how these things are drawn, but this is how it works. So it's coming up here, going across through a resistor to ground. So that's why I have a ground connection. But then I took a look at the rest of the radio and said, well, what else do we have here? Well, if I look at the cathode of this 6F5G tube, it too is going to end up at ground. If I look at the cathode of this 6J5G tube, I don't see any reference to ground on this one. However, if I look at the cathode of the 6K7G tube, cathode goes right to ground right here. Same thing is true for the converter tube, the 6A8G to ground, and the 1232 RF goes to ground also. So this radio does go to ground for the caps. So I'm going to have to rethink that a little bit, but that's not a problem. I'm just going to, kind of change my strategy a little bit. All right. So with that out of the way, if you remember last time I told you there were some components right down here that were tied directly to this filter cap, and there were two resistors and a capacitor. I've actually replaced those two resistors. They were at a tolerance, and I've mounted everything up here. So we've got that clean. So all I really need to do now is install this 4 microfarad cap on the terminal strip right here. This red wire that goes right here will go up to that capacitor, and then I just have to mount everything the right way, and we're good to go. We're ready to do a test. And I still have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wax caps to do. So that's where we are. But I want to show you one other cool thing before we go off to our other project. So let me set that up. Okay, what I want to show you is this meter. I got a new meter. It's an OWON B41T. Just another meter, right? Well, not really. So first of all, let's just check resistance of a capacitor. Of a resistor. We have a 100 ohm resistor right here. Let's see what it measures. Let's get that in the right spot. There we go. Okay, it measures 100 ohms. Great. So what's so special about it? Well, it's Bluetooth. So if I take this blue button and hold it, it puts it into Bluetooth mode. Here it's in Bluetooth mode. So now I'm going to take an iPad and I'm going to open up this app. And I found the BDM right there. So now, let's see what happens. Let's get this out of the way. So this is really handy when you're working on something and you're in tight quarters and you need to see something really quick. So let's measure our resistor again. And you can see the meter right there, and there's the Bluetooth. Boom, right on the money. It also gives you history, so you could look at history of things. So you could see it actually maps it out and charts it. So it's really cool. I still have to learn a little bit more about it, but now I could mount this on my bench, and when I'm doing measurements I can see it really easily. Alright, let's get on to the other project and see where we're going there. Alright, so here's where we are with our radio Craftsman cabinet. So you'll see right there that I've actually found a really good faceplate bezel that works really well with this hole that I cut out. It's actually a Ward's Airline, I think. It seems like it was made for this thing, and it's perfect. It's got, you know, the brown and the gold. It matches the dial. If you look at the dial really closely, you can see it's almost like an exact match. So that's what we're going to use, and that will help us when we mount the grill cloth. I also found some Art Deco knobs, and there's an example of one of them right there. So we're good to go there. So we're getting close here, but there's a few other things that we have to fix. So let's do that first. I'll show you what that's all about. Okay, so if you remember our design, this is where our speaker goes under here. All right, there's a hole in here where the speaker goes. And I realized something the other day, that before I start mounting this top on, it's not mounted yet. If I mount this on with biscuits or dowels or whatever, and I ever have to replace the speaker, I can't. There's no room. Right? And it's mostly because of the way that I've built this thing. So I've got this bar here. There's no way to get the speaker in and out once that top is on. So I've kind of hit a little bit of a brick wall, painted myself in the corner a little bit with the design, that if the speaker ever had to be replaced for some reason, I couldn't do it. So that wouldn't be good. So I need to come up with a plan B. So, you know, originally I was going to put some dowels in here, right, and just fasten that thing down and be done with it. Well, we have a plan B now. So what we're going to do is we're going to use cabinet magnets, right, door latch magnets, and we're going to put one here and one here, and we're going to, when you put this thing down, it's going to be in the perfect spot. And if you ever have to remove it, you just lift it up. That's what we're going to do. Originally I was going to use hinges, decided not to do that, and that's how we're going to handle that problem, so that you can get to the speaker at some point if you ever had to. Right? So that's problem number one. That's been resolved. We have a plan. As far as problem number two, it's not really a problem. Issue number two is, how do we mount the Class D amplifier in this thing? Right? You remember me mentioning that I was going to build a little shelf on the bottom of this thing underneath, right? That when you put it on the hairpin legs, you can get to it. So let me show you what my solution is for that. Let me set it up. Okay, so I built this little, I guess you call it a little shelf that mounts underneath this thing, under the radio on the bottom. And if you take a closer look at it, if we turn it around, you'll see that we have our Class D components inside. This is the part that's going to be facing the back of the radio. So the way I designed this thing is, I designed it so you can remove this board. And you need to do that to service it, right? If one of these boards were to go bad, you need to replace it, you need to be able to get it out. So I've designed it so it slips out and slips back in, and it'll be mounted on here, on the bottom. And I'm going to put some kind of grill in the front here so that cans don't get in there, and, you know, so it's not dangerous. So this is how we're going to handle the Class D amplifier. When I do mount it underneath this thing, I'm going to apply the grill cloth here. I'm going to stain this the same way I'm going to stain this top and this bottom. But this part here is going to be a grill cloth when we go all the way around. So this is just another one of my woodworking feats of strength here. and that's done. All scrap wood, right? I'm using the same wood that I'm using for this thing, so nothing unique here. So that's how we're going to handle the Class D amplifier. So what's next for me to do? What's next for me to do is install the magnets that I mentioned earlier. Let me zoom out. Install the magnets on these side pieces right here. There's also a plan for me to install the beveled glass, so I need to figure out how I'm going to cut this open and put the beveled glass in there. I need to mount the hinges, and I need to finish these top pieces and this bottom, if you can see that, this bottom lip of the cabinet. I also need to refinish or finish the shelf that I built for the power supply and the amp. So not too much more to do. And then put the grill cloth on, and I need to figure out how I'm going to do that. So we're getting pretty close here, and you can see it's in there. If you take a peek at the top of how it looks with the top removed, I don't know if you could see that. Let me just tilt this camera down a little bit. That's how it's going to sit in there. That's about where it's going to be. Pretty close. So it's looking really good. All right. So that's the update on our projects. And now I'm gonna go back and start working on that Zenith and get the next episode up on YouTube. So wanted to give you a quick update on how we're doing. I hope everybody's doing well. Have a great day.